Welcome to the ABCs of Horses, a Big Blend radio podcast featuring Christy Wood, a world champion horse trainer, a carded horse show judge, an equestrian expert, and an author. Hey everybody, on today's show we are talking about hoof and hair care. It's the big H. So, we've got Christy Wood here who's going to give us some insight about how to take care of your horse's hoof and hair, the mane, and also the body, the forelock, the tail, all of that. And you know what? I can't wait to get into this because it's so interesting about the hoof. Do we go natural? Do we let it not have a farrier come in and take care of it? How do we do all that? And then we think about the hair care. When do we actually cut your horse's mane and trim, I should say, your horse's mane or tail? And how do we actually get that hair care going well? It's about certain vitamins, I believe. So let me bring Christy on because she knows everything. So Christy Wood, welcome back. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm very fine. And guess what? H also stands for happy. And if we're talking about horses, we're happy and we're happy when we take care of our horses as well.
Well, you know what? As Sheryl Crow, the singer, says, if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. It can't. I love that. And she loves horses too. So but horses make me happy, and doing this show, we're recording this, Nancy, just to be honest, Nancy and I have been out running hurricanes. So our life has been a little bit upside down and turvy and weird. And as soon as I knew we were recording this show with Christy, I went, oh, we could have some normalcy, right? And I wanted to go to that. I mean, that's the thing. Horses have this balance. When you say about happy, I think sometimes when you're going through something personally as a human, you can go to your horse and say, hey man, can I just spill this out with you? And then they drool on you or nibble on your ear, and they kind of go like, hey man, it's just not that big of a deal, right? There is something about that human horse connection that can actually make you really happy, right?
Yes,
just like they say the dog is the best friend, I think the horse is too.
And that horse is probably telling you, hey, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff.
That's really true, isn't it?
Yes.
It is. Yeah. And they will drool on you. They will. And drool is good, and get over it. Can we talk about that? About Christy, we always go into rabbit holes, but I want to ask you this. Can we just get over, when moms have babies and the babies spit up on them, they have to learn to get over, like, you're not going to be clean and perfect with a baby, right? Is that not the same as when we start to have horses in our lives that you go out there, you think your clothing is going to be perfect, get over it? Just saying.
Well,
I had to bring this up.
Okay, we'll just talk about this briefly. I never wear white to the barn because my horse is going to rub on me and probably get some goo out of their eye. They may clear their nose, and I'm going to have snot, and my white blouse is going to be spotted. So I just don't wear white. And, horse drool is actually a good thing because you want saliva in a horse's mouth because it keeps the mouth soft and pliable. We say if a horse doesn't have saliva and you don't see spit once in a while when it has a bit in its mouth or even when it chews, that's not a good thing. You don't want a horse to have a hard mouth, and a horse that has a very dry mouth will have a hard mouth. So we like seeing drool, and for young people that go out there and the first time they have lessons, and I train my students to put their thumb into the corner of the horse's mouth. That's the cue for this horse to feel that when he feels the thumb, they open their mouth and accept the bit. But I've had a lot of young people, whether they're boys or girls, going, ew, and they just, when you're going to be around a horse, you're going to get dirty, and there's nothing wrong with horse slobber. That's just part of the experience.
But once you accept it, it's fun. You know what I mean?
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. I think our society has kind of gone into this kind of interesting world, and everybody's different on their beliefs. And I'm not getting into all that, but I'm just saying, don't think you can be in the world of horses and not get dirty.
Right.
And once you accept getting dirty, it's so much more fun. You can go, I'm getting dirty today with horses,
Well, so
and
let's talk about getting dirty and what we do with a horse's hoof.
ah, this is cool
And
because they collect a lot of dirt in that
yeah,
hoof, don't
so
they?
horse's hoof care is really important. Just even the basics of going out to get your horse prepared to ride. You're going to clean its feet every time before you ride, depending on the terrain that you're going to be riding in. If it's a nice sandy arena, there probably isn't an issue with having to check the hooves after you ride. But if you leave the arena and go up on the mountain and cross some rivers, it might be a good idea for you to recheck those hooves when you get back, just in case the horse has picked up a stone. So you will get a little dirty cleaning a hoof. All four hoofs should be completely and thoroughly clean from the heel to the toe, around the V of the horse's
Mm,
frog. If they have a
mhm.
shoe on, it will actually hold in more debris and possibly a foreign object that could cause that horse harm. So that's a very important thing, is to check those hooves before you ride. And then it's also good horsemanship to ride with a hoof pick, either on your belt or on your saddle,
Oh,
as you're on the trail. That happened to me on the Chief Joe this year for the first time in, oh gosh, 19 years. My horse actually picked up 2 stones riding down a gravel road. And I know my horse well enough that within the first step, he took a big step and literally limped. And I knew immediately something was wrong. And I pulled him up to a stop, dismounted. And sure enough, he had a big old rock wedged into his shoe and his hoof. So those are important factors to be aware of how your horse moves and to clean those hooves.
wow. And I think about it because when I was a teen and had our horse Cinnabar, my baby, she was my best friend. Seriously. Um, I always looked at the end of the day about grooming, whether or not I rode her, it was grooming time, and that included her hooves and
Mhm.
checking her hooves. And it was kind of a relationship building thing because I had to tell her, I'm going to go to your hooves now. I'm going to do
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
And she was a rescue horse. She was a pony cross Arabian, and she was a little Spitfire too. So I had to really, build this relationship. It was like, I'm going to now go to your hoof. And that was an issue.
Well,
And so
it
it took
takes
time.
patience and perseverance and practice,
Yes.
the 3 Ps, to do that correctly and do it on a regular basis, and be patient enough to give the horse a few pressure points so that they do pick up the hoof and they're comfortable with you holding that hoof and allowing you to clean it. So it's not just within a couple of seconds. It may take you 8 seconds. It may take you 15 to 20 seconds to clean a hoof. That horse has to be able to stand there and be comfortable on the other 3 legs while you're holding that hoof up, and it shouldn't take it away from you. So you have to practice that. And that's also
Mm.
very important, not just for you before you ride, or even checking your horse once a day if you don't ride. And especially in the winter when the ground now gets muddy, the ground changes as the horse walks across it. It's going to turn up rocks that are underneath the topsoil. So you need to check those hooves. And it's very important that you also get your horse prepared for the farrier. Your farrier's
Mm.
not, his job is not to train your horse to lift his hoof so he can work on it. You need to have that horse trained for your farrier. That's the
Oh,
right thing to do, and polite thing to do is to make sure your horse is prepared to stand there that long, to either have shoes put on or have his feet trimmed, and not have your farrier be caught up underneath the horse that's pulling the leg away and stomping on him or stepping on him or pushing his body into him. He needs to stand quietly and accept that procedure.
wow. Okay. So this brings me to a whole like conversation because like I talk about my horse, Cinnabar, at the time, she was a rescue horse and had all these issues, and we had to really just take time. And doing the
Good.
hoof thing, checking her hoof and cleaning her hoof was a big deal. We had farriers come out, and we were always like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But we were really getting this horse, and she was getting better step by step,
Mhm.
and we had communication with the farrier. The farrier knew what was going on. He knew she was an abused horse. She was abused. Her previous owner beat her up with a polo stick in her stable.
I don't
Okay.
like it.
And so that was her background, but we just worked with her, and love and care and patience.
Yes.
Patience and taking time, not thinking this has to be done by this time. That does not work. Horses
Mhm.
don't care about that. It's about letting them go through the process, just like anybody that's gone through trauma or abuse is a human, same thing as an animal. But I want to go to this about, because you're talking about their feet.
Mhm.
This is kind of a sensitive area, right?
But it's
And
also horses like routine. So it's a routine that you ask your horse the same way. You tie your horse up in the same spot that you're possibly going to work, even if it's in the paddock. They need to expect that this is going to be a daily procedure, is to have their hooves checked. And again, you need to be ready for that farrier.
so
You
it's
can only tell
daily.
your farrier, I'm sorry, my horse won't stand for you, one or two times, but you need to all of a sudden reverse the role playing here. And can you imagine being the farrier standing underneath that horse for an hour to an hour and a half that it takes to maybe put a full set of shoes on a horse, and what your back is going to go through, what you have to do to be good at your job. And it's hard to be good at your job when that horse is pulling the hoof
Hmm.
away. Somebody's going to get the nail in the wrong place. My farrier's going to get stabbed by that nail if that horse keeps acting up. So
Work on it.
you've got to get your horse prepared for that, for both you and the work that's going to be done, even if it's going to go to see a veterinarian for whatever reason, even a lameness check. I mean,
Well,
the veterinarians have other methods. They can give your horse a little, relaxation injection to help them get their procedures done. But that shouldn't have to happen with your veterinarian,
well,
with your farrier or with you.
this brings me to a really good point of where I was going is, I talk about our horse, Cinnabar, that was rescued and everything, and we weren't, we were just taking care of a horse. It wasn't anything about, show jumping or anything like that. But you help people choose a horse if they want to show jump, trail ride, do all these different things. You
Mhm.
do that, as, a horse trainer, and everything that you do as a world champion, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to ask you about that. How, when, when someone looks at buying a horse, should you look at how their disposition is with, a farrier, being groomed, all of that?
Certainly. That's sort of the kicking the tires, as you used to say when people would buy cars. Certainly, you're going to go out and look for a horse to purchase, and you're going to watch how the owner handles that horse, ties it up, grooms it, picks its feet. You're going to observe that first before you do it. Then after the owner gets that horse prepared to be ridden, I'm going to go do the same thing. I'm going to see how that horse responds to me. I want to see if it's a light touch of running my hand down its leg, or do I have to really kick hard? Do I have to push with my shoulder to push that horse off balance to get that leg to be picked up? I'll discern all of that by working on that horse, but I certainly do it first by observation. And I observe
Mm.
who that owner is, or the handler has been on a regular basis with that horse first, before I just jump in and say, okay, I'm just going to go pick up your feet. I never do it that way. I need to see how the interaction is going to be from a regular routine that this horse has had with a human being.
Wow. Wow. So it's about the interaction, no matter what,
Right. So that
the
also tells you the
interaction.
disposition, but I'm going to definitely pick up all four hooves. I want to make sure this horse is comfortable with that. I don't,
Hmm.
I'm going to observe all of that. And then that's also another way for me checking confirmation, how the leg hangs, is the hoof centered? There's a lot that
Hmm.
you can see on bone structure and how the horse is put together. We call that confirmation, just by lifting up its leg and looking how that hoof hangs as you're holding it up off the ground. So there's just
And if a horse flinches when you go to a certain hoof, doesn't that tell you something?
it just depends on what the flinch means.
Yeah. I mean,
There's a
I've
lot of
gone
different
through
things.
that with horses
If
and donkeys and mules
right,
where,
so let's say again, it's a rescue horses are a big gamble because you don't know the background.
yeah.
So if you start for the very first time to go reach down and just decide to pick up a hoof, and that horse shies or moves sideways, then you need to think about your approach. Maybe you need to groom that horse's shoulder, run your hand softly down the backside of the leg, put one hand back behind the knee to sort of press to make the horse bend its knee, and then lift the hoof up. There's a lot of different ways of approaching a horse and doing it slowly, and so that horse is comfortable. So those are things, that's why it's better to observe the human that's regularly dealing with this horse and how they do things to know that routine. And then I'll go back and pretty much do the same thing, but I never go down and just grab a hoof and expect a horse to lift a hoof up. The horse has a delayed reaction between pressure points that you give them and putting that through the sensory nerve endings they have to get to the brain to tell them what they need to do so they can give you what you want. It's about 4 seconds. So to go down there and grab that leg, the horse is going to, what is she doing? Why is she grabbing my leg like that so fast or very strongly? When you run your hand down the back of the leg from starting at the elbow all the way down and take your time, there's your 3 to 4 seconds. And the horse goes, oh, she wants me to lift up my hoof. I'll be glad to do that for her. And then they do it. You can start touching my horse at the top of the elbow. They've already got the hoof off the ground. They like the routine. They know what's coming. And it's been a pleasant experience. And it's been a routine over and over and over again.
Oh, we talk about this on every podcast. Animals like their routine.
Yes, they do.
And if you don't do it, they start to worry.
Right.
Because routine means we're living, we're happy, we're good. Everything's going as normal. Just as us humans, I know a lot of people that need their coffee in the morning. I'm one of them, and when it's not there, I go, wah, 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 wah. Now my whole life has changed.
Well, let's talk about the hoof a little bit more since we're right there. Let's, so the hoof actually grows like your human fingernail grows. So, it's constantly growing, and, about every 6 weeks, if your horse is barefoot, your farrier should come out and trim it because that hoof is going to spread.
So that's without the shoe, right?
Right. Yes.
So barefoot is without the shoe.
If your horse is barefoot, that hoof still needs to be trimmed every 6 to 8 weeks because that hoof is going to spread. It's going to grow. As it grows, it's going to break off a little bit. It can also grow unevenly depending on the horse's conformation. So you want to keep your horse balanced, and that's why you need to have a regular trim so that horse can perform correctly for you and what you want. Now, there's barefoot horses. There are some people put boots on horses today because they don't want to have the hoof traumatized by, this is their term, traumatized by a nail or wearing a shoe. So some people decide to put little booties on their horses or covers on their feet.
Wait, what? Can you describe that? Like a booty?
Well, it's a horse boot. It's a leather boot. So it's got a sole, a very heavy rubber sole, so that the horse can walk, let's say down a street or over some rocks and not have the experience of being barefoot or feeling those rocks. So some people prefer to put horse boots on their horses instead of shoes. I'm just telling you, those are different options that some people use.
Okay.
And then the other, of course, option would be to have your horse shod. And having your horse shod protects actually the horse's hoof from the elements of, let's say, riding down a lot of concrete roads or riding over a lot of rocks or pebbles or through rivers. And so the shoe can protect the hoof. We have a term, we say, we gets the bottom of that hoof up off the deck. So the bottom of that hoof is not exposed to the elements. So a horse can actually walk better without being impaired by.
It's like uplifting your car. Like you want your car to be, I mean, our RAV4 is lifted up a little bit so we don't get all the rocks and stuff.
I don't know about your car because your car's, it's actually sitting on rubber. This rubber tires that have air in it.
But it's risen up a little bit. So in the horse's hoof, it's kind of giving them some levity.
Well, here's the difference for you. Why don't you go out and go barefoot and go ahead and walk through a river? I like barefoot too, but I'm not going to walk over sharp pebbles and rocks, acorns and things like that. They're going to hurt my feet. So I'm going to put shoes on to protect them.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I do that. by the way.
Okay.
But that's the same thing as a car. Like a car can be like, here's my normal car, or it's going to be elevated up. They levitate cars up a little bit
Uh,
so they don't feel all the rocks and stones
right. Yeah. They've
because
got suspension.
we go on stupid roads. Nancy and I go on stupid roads all the time. And even our undercarriage just came off going through potholes in New Orleans. Thank you. Anyway, we
Well, so let's talk about being shod.
but I mean that about with the horses
Yeah.
and just trying for new people to understand that new horse owners to understand that like a horse's hoof, it's like when you elevate your car so that it doesn't feel all these
Well, it's
the
not just for
debris and
elevation. It's just, it depends again. It depends, number one, on, first of all, you have to look at the consistency and how good a hoof your horse has. If your horse has thin walls, if it's the hooves constantly chip, if they have a tendency to flare when they grow,
mm,
there's just a lot of reasons why we put shoes on. And the great thing about that is we can actually control the growth. We can enhance growth. We can actually leave a nail off on the back end to help a heel to spread if that's what we need. There's just a lot of different reasons we
mm.
shoe horses. Some horses have really good solid hooves and they can actually walk over some of those rocks and be okay. Some of them can't. Some of them, the hooves just won't last. They'll become lame, they'll get sore, they'll get bruised.
So is that when a farrier comes into place where they understand the horse's hoof?
Well, that's
It's
the
kind
owner's
of like a
responsibility
different
too.
doctor and they can go, this is what the horse needs.
Right. But that's part of your, when you go out and shop and you look for a horse, you ask the owner, the current owner, how is that horse being shod? Or you can obviously observe how that horse is being shod. Now, a lot of people half shoe their horses, which means they only put shoes on the front and they leave them barefoot behind. And that can be done, for the arena working, if their back feet are in good shape and you don't need to do that. Some people do it to cut costs, but really cost shouldn't be a factor. And if you're going to start cutting costs, maybe you shouldn't own a horse because you're going to be
Hmm.
spending a little bit of money for their care. But they'll just shoe on the front hooves because the horse carries 2/3 of its weight on those front feet. Those front feet
Wow.
are going to take the blunt of all the weight and
Wow.
most of the things that you're doing. So some people just take that option. Sometimes they also leave shoes off on the back during the winter time. We have some scenarios here in California where we have a lot of rain. And if a horse is standing in a lot of water in a pasture or a stall gets flooded or we have flood situations, that much moisture can actually start to disintegrate a hoof and then the shoe will definitely come off or be ripped off. And you don't want that to happen either. So it's a
Wow.
catch-22 of maybe I'll barefoot my
Yeah.
horse through the winter because I'm not planning to really ride anywhere other than a sandy arena. That might be okay if your horse, excuse me, is still sound being barefoot. And that's something you need to know from the person you're buying the horse from. If you decide you want to barefoot just to, again, I hate to say cutting costs, or you want to try to barefoot your horse for the winter, and all of a sudden you barefoot your horse and they're just lame and they've never walked normal since then, they probably still need to have those horseshoes. So there's just a lot of variables that go into observing and knowing what a horse needs and what that individual horse needs to protect its feet, enhance growth, protect them from the rocks and the trails. And you definitely, I mean, I ride on the Chief Joseph Historic Trail ride. There's absolutely no way you can ride a horse on that trail without being shod. And we've watched people go barefoot. They last less than a day. We've had people that go with boots. The boots come off. They cannot really stay on for very long. Those horses usually end up being trailered back either the first day or the second day, halfway through the ride, because they've lost a boot, and now their horses can't even walk without the boots. The boots just don't
So
stay on, and
we,
it's serious terrain. So it's just different scenarios are going to tell
yeah,
you
because I
what
was
you
going to
need to do
ask
for them.
about who does shoes versus who doesn't. If I just want to go on a trail ride and I'm just having a horse in my backyard, right?
Well, again, if you're going to
And
ride your horse in the sandy arena and the horse is sound, if barefoot, then that's fine. But some horses, if all of a sudden you buy a horse and he's been shod for 2 years and you want to barefoot him, I'm going to guarantee, I bet the first month this horse is going to be sore. He's going to feel the ground because he never has before.
Okay. So I've seen horses hooves even in resorts, right? So the resort thing, that kind of, I'm weird about the horse thing in resorts. I am, just sometimes I just
Well, what
feel
are you
like
talking about resorts? You mean they're barefoot, they're shod, or what are you talking
they're
about?
just, they feel like depleted souls, these horses sometimes. When you go there, you go to a resort and they're like, oh, you can go on this horse trail ride, and you go there and you look at them and you can see that they're just like, oh God, please don't sit on me. You know, there's a certain thing.
That's another whole thing about care.
That's a whole other
Care
conversation,
custody
I
and
know,
control. Yeah, and
but
hopefully those people are watching, and if you see
but
something that
I
doesn't look
look
right,
at
you
their
should address
hooves.
it.
I look at their hooves, right?
Okay.
I
All
can
right.
already feel there's the emotional like and whatever, and then I look at their hooves, and I've seen horses' hooves chipped, like literally part of their hoof chipped up, and then I go, well, we get that on our own nails. Do we freak out and
Well,
not?
okay.
But I also know it is painful.
Well, let me ask you this. You see a chipped hoof, is that horse barefoot or are they shod?
I don't know because now we're in
And then
this
you
little
and you
resort
really
thing.
can't
So
answer
what
that
do you
question.
do?
You can't really
Yeah.
answer that question 100% because usually a horse that is wearing a shoe is not going to have a chipped hoof. That shoe is going to protect that hoof from being chipped. It's usually the barefoot horses that'll end up being chipped because that hoof, like I said, is constantly growing. So the
Does
longer
it
it
hurt them?
grows, then it's going to start to chip and it's going to lose its shape. And that's why you need your farrier to do a trim.
Does it hurt them if it chips like
Well, and
that?
every
Like,
horse is going to be different. If you sit on that horse and he
ah,
starts to head bob, and yes, he limps, then obviously, yes, it hurts him. And I'd dismount and I'd say, I want another horse. And I think we need to
wow.
address this. But, you don't know that. Maybe these horses are sound. I've got a horse here that's got absolutely fabulous. So it's Dollar. I think Dollar was the one either you or Lisa rode, who has a
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic, probably the best hoof I've ever seen or judged for myself. It's solid and it's hard. It's really great. So at home here, she's now semi-retired. She rides just only in the Sandy Arena. She's barefoot and she's sound as can be. But when she was on the Chief Joe, that horse wore shoes. I'm going to
Mm,
protect that horse because I know what terrain I'm going to be riding in.
mm,
And I need to make sure that she still has good hooves and she needs those hooves protected. So if we're talking about hooves, then we also need to talk about how we can also feed our horse to enhance that hoof growth. So
mm-hmm.
number one, hoof growth is going to come from genetics. It's going to come
Okay.
from grandma and grandpa and the background of what this horse has had before. There are certain bloodlines that actually produce smaller hooves than others. I'm not going to go into that on this podcast.
Oh, wow.
That's
But
different for different bloodlines, depending on what the horse is being used for. But you're dealing with genetics. Now we've been able to create some wonderful supplements in the equine world through medicines and supplements and different vitamins that will help enhance a horse's hoof to grow. So you can kind of help genetics a little bit or kind of get around it just a little bit, and try to deal with creating a diet that's going to help your horse's hooves to stay strong, grow some hoof wall, and be healthy enough to take the trauma of that mountain riding and all the hard riding or the showing that you're going to do, and the trauma of also wearing a shoe. Yes, there's a little bit of a trauma, and I hate to use that word, but I mean, if you're going to put a nail through a horse's hoof to hold the shoe on, obviously we're going to be putting a little hole in there. We're going to clinch that nail on it to hold the shoe on. But you're also dealing with the lower part of the hoof where there are no nerve endings. It's like the white of your fingernail and it grows out. And if you know of anybody that's ever bitten their fingernails, you can bite all the way down to the quick. And halfway down that horse's hoof is going to be where the quick is. From the middle of that horse's hoof to the ground, it's dead tissue. So it
mm,
grows out, and that's the tissue that the nail goes through, or not tissue, but the consistency of the hoof, of what the hoof is made up of. And that's what the nail goes through, and that's what holds that shoe on to protect that hoof so that horse can be sound and be used and be comfortable.
Wow, that's amazing when you think about it, about how we've got into like, here's the horse, right? And they did what they did before humans. But like when you think about history of humans and horses, and then you think about how they have fought in millions of wars. Like, I'm not kidding. I mean, I know millions is probably,
Mhm.
um, a little exaggerated, but when you think about what horses have done, it's millions of horses that have fought in wars. I wonder about how their hooves were. How
Okay,
were they prepared?
let's talk about that just briefly. We'll do a little bit of history, and we're going to go back to my
You know,
teacher.
you can never come on this podcast and just do like, here's this ABC and go,
Well, but we are.
it's never like that.
We're going to talk about hooves. So let's go back to my Chief Joseph historic trail ride that I go on. And you go back to the history of the Native Americans that have horses. And we just go back to the cavalry that were chasing the Native Americans to put them on reservations. The cavalry came out from the east, and they came out with thoroughbred horses, lighter built horses, and they shod those horses because they rode in towns that had cobblestones. And they were a different breed of horse. So the cavalry shod their horses because the horses had to be, because their hooves weren't hardy, and solid enough to handle the mountain terrain and the natural terrain. Now you look at the other spectrum of that, and the Nez Perce tribe is the tribe that developed the Appaloosa breed, and they bred into their horses a horse that would have a hardy hoof. I tell you what, the Native Americans didn't have horseshoes and nails. They bred a horse that had to go over those rocks, go chase those buffalo, and ride through different terrain, and had to have a solid hoof. And they created that by making them tough and doing that and breeding that into this breed.
Wow.
So that's the difference, is the cavalry had to stop. Oh, gosh, we're throwing a shoe. Oh my gosh, we got to shoe our horse so we keep chasing the Indians. Okay? The Indians
Wow.
Native Americans didn't have to do that. They had hardy hooves. These horses were mountain bred. And I tell you what, it's a survival of the fittest.
Wow.
If those horses if all of a sudden genetics pops out a horse for a Native American, and that horse can't walk because it's lame all the time because it's barefoot, it's probably going to end up in the soup pot that night, or it's going to be sold off. Who knows what? I just seriously, survival
Wow.
of the fittest. And they bred that into the horses. And when I said that, is the Nez Perce that are responsible for creating the Appaloosa horse, and I'm saying created, is they culled inferior stallions, which means they gelded them or they sold them off, and they did the same thing with the mares, and they kept the top breeding stock that they had that developed the great hoof disposition and stamina that those Appaloosas have, and that's what they got. That was
It's
like
amazing when
It's
you
like
think
Planned
about
Parenthood.
this.
They created a really great specimen of a mountain horse that could outrun the cavalry's horses, because they were stable and they were shod. Kind of
I
interesting.
mean, that's what I think is so amazing. I mean, when we talk about things, it's not like, I love this podcast with you so much because we bring in history, right?
Right.
Because
Well,
as
okay, so
a new horse person coming in,
Mhm.
going, oh, I want to do this and that. We want you to have all the tools at your disposal.
That's
That's
right. We
what we're
want to
doing with
help
this
you be
podcast,
prepared. That's what this
right?
kind of podcast is about.
And the reality is going back into history and why and how.
So
And
let's
I think
talk a little bit more
that's
about
amazing.
that history. So the horses that are stabled at the fort are getting fed cut hay or cut grass, whatever they could possibly get their hands on. But the horses are stabled, so they're not really roaming as much anymore. They're behind the wall of the fort. They've got to be in a stall. They've got to be in a stable. The Native American horses are out there on the grasslands. They're eating what's naturally good for them in vitamins and minerals.
Freedom.
It's really great. So they're going to have a better diet. If you look at it, they really actually have a better diet. So speaking about diet, I have a wonderful, and I'm going to
Ooh,
I don't endorse a lot of things, but I'm definitely going to endorse this on my podcast. And I feed Platinum Performance, Equine Wellness and Performance Formula. The Platinum Performance is a company that was developed by some veterinarians out at Alamo Pintata in Santa Ynez, and they created a wonderful supplement for horses, and they've even gone so far to truly have special supplements for joints, for horses that are jumping and cutting and working hard. They even have an extra hoof supplement that you can feed on top of this regular formula to help enhance hoof growth. And they've just been very smart about what they've done. I've seen excellent results on my horse's feet and their hair coat and everything else. And just to go over this a little bit in the analysis, it's what in this is there are micro minerals in this. There are trace minerals, there are vitamins and amino acids. And to me, the amino acids are the part that is really going to help your body to still repair cells and grow things. No matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, you need a healthy body, human or animal. And now, especially, we've changed our horses' environment. We have them now in paddocks and corrals that don't have all that free roam like the Native Americans had for hundreds and thousands of acres to raise our horses on. We all have little ranchettes of 10 acres and so on. And so we have a smaller space that our horses are in. So we've taken away sort of their natural ability to go out and graze and get those minerals and, even get the salt, the little few things from the dirt and the minerals that are in the ground and all these amino acids. So this is a wonderful, Platinum Performance is a wonderful omega-3 fatty acids, trace minerals, amino acids, and just a really great supplement that I feed. And it has helped actually change a little bit of the genetics. I have one horse here that has a hoof issue that we're dealing with, and she needs to be shod all the time to be sound. And we've seen a lot of change in her hoof. They're no longer flaky and chippy, and the walls are not thin anymore. She's actually holding a shoe on, and she's just doing amazing things. And then, of course, what you feed for your horse's hoof to enhance hoof growth and wellness in their body, just to keep them healthy, it also goes into that beautiful hair coat. We talked about a hair coat. So feeding the same supplement, it transmits into a shiny hair coat, a horse that can grow a good hair coat. If they get cut, they're going to heal quickly. It enhances growth with manes and tails. It's also going to go into the hoof as well.
That's awesome. I love that. And for people to know, especially again, as we always talk about people getting started into the world of horse care, because it is a big deal. And that's why we are doing this ABCs of horses, so that you can just from day to day get some information to actually understand the world of horse care, because horse care is a biggie. It is not like, hey, I bought a horse, y'all, and it's all good. No, you have a bunch to do. So we're talking about hooves and hair care, which go hand in hand, just like us humans. Our hair and our fingernails and toenails go hand in hand, right, Christy?
Right.
It's the same thing. So we all have that. But everybody, we'll be back next month. We're always here every second Saturday with Christy. Christy, it's so cool. Are you going to be going on another wandering, I'm looking at the end of no, I know you just did your big, you did the big,
Chief Joseph Trail Ride. I did that in August.
You did the big one, the Chief
Joseph.
That's a big one. But are you going to go back to the Rose Parade, or are you going to do that?
No. We haven't applied to do that. We did it 4 times. It was wonderful riding in the Pasadena Tournament of Roses Parade. Our group has to regroup again in order to maybe do that. So no, that's not in the works. But I'm enjoying my horses this summer. We do camping over at the beach near Morro Bay, and so we've been doing that a couple of times a year for about 5 days. We get to ride in the foothills and on the sand dunes, which is really wonderful. And I've done a couple of competitions for fun this year, not as serious, trying to chase points. And I've got horses that are just really enjoying that, leaving the show arena and going into a more fun arena, and they're winning in that as well. So it's just a lot of fun. I've got some new riding buddies that are excited about joining me on the Chief Joe next year. So we're actually planning a year ahead to find drivers and starting to plan our routes and how to get our horses ready. And it's just real exciting things. And then I've started a 4th book. I'm just going to start working on one, but I think I'm going to have to wait till some rainy days, and we're really hoping that California gets those pretty soon. because we're
Yeah,
pretty
you need
dry out
some
here.
rain. It's been wonky weather around the country, right?
Yeah.
But you guys need some just gentle rainfall. Gentle, gentle rainfall.
Well, we just need to
Out in
we need to get the leaves cleaned off of our trees. Our trees can't breathe anymore. I could probably grow potatoes on the leaves that are the dust that's on the leaves of the trees. It's just been a dry year with a lot of dust, with a few fires, and just very dry. So we're hoping that rain will come. You're right, gently first, and just give the ground a good soaking and keep that dust down.
Thanks always, Chrissy. It's always fun. And you always just make me think back to our days of having horses and going, God, I could have done this better, you know. And I know, no, I really do.
Well,
But
good,
what
good.
I know is I had a relationship with my horse.
Yes,
And that is what I always go back to is always have a relationship with the animal in your presence
right.
that is part of your family
Well,
and
thank you, Lisa,
have
for this
that.
opportunity. Yeah, thank you so much
Thank you.
for listening. It's a lot of fun. We hope everybody is learning from this. Again, I please extend the invitation. Please send me an email. Let me hear from you. Let me know how you like the podcast. Maybe something a topic you would like us
Send
to
a
cover.
question.
Yes,
Send
send
us
me a question.
questions. We want to
Yeah,
answer them.
you bet.
I won't answer them because I can't, but Christy, she'll do it.
I'd be very happy to.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's ABCs of Horses featuring Christy Wood. You can keep up with Christy and learn more about her services and her books by going to her website, wdnhorse.com. Keep up with Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.